There have been a lot of reports just in the last day regarding Toronto Raptors player personnel, whether it be about trades, whether it be about potential free agent signings, players coming, players going, players extending their contracts, heck, even some players getting super max contracts over the next couple seasons. So we'll break all of that down, as one report basically indicated the Toronto Raptors organization is kind of in a volatile spot given all their players' needs and the contract structures that they currently have rolling. So we'll discuss all of that in this video. As well, on top of it, we have indications that OG and Anunoby will be getting a bigger role going into next season. Kyle Lowry could potentially get waived by the Miami Heat, and Raptors fans are hoping he lands back into Toronto, and we have a new Team Canada head coach. So lots of stuff to break down in this video. Without further ado, let's jump on the first topic of discussion. The first bit of madness in this video is things are getting volatile for the Toronto Raptors. As we all know, following the reports of this team, following all the talking heads, following all the people on Twitter, all the insiders that have been discussing the Toronto Raptors since we had that tumultuous end of the season last year, since we fired Nick Nurse, right? There are a lot of avenues, there are a lot of things that could potentially go down. And Zach Lowe, Jake Fisher, they gave us some pretty deep insights in terms of what's going on. The first player I want to talk about is Gary Trent Jr. As we all know, he picked up his player option coming into the season, and both Zach Lowe, Jake Fisher, multiple reports have indicated that Gary Trent Jr. is likely going to be getting a contract extension this summer. So that's one thing we can probably be happy about as Toronto Raptors fans. I mentioned this possibility in the video we broke down when he signed or picked up his player option, that contract extension is something that could be likely coming down the road. And personally, I think as an organization, Toronto should really prioritize extending Gary Trent Jr. right now, because he's coming off a dip of a year, a lower performing year, didn't exceed the expectations the team had for him, didn't take a major leap in his performance, right? And Gary Trent Jr. is a player that has a lot of areas to grow as a guy on the defensive end in terms of being a facilitator. I mean, he's a great ball handler, a great shooter. Improves that passing game, gets a little bit nicer behind the three-point arc, add some stuff there. Gary Trent Jr. could be a legitimate star in this league. So I think right now could be a little buy low opportunity, give some security to your shooting guard, and extend him for the long run, which I would be very happy with bringing back Gary Trent Jr., even though he did have a couple dips, showed some inconsistencies over the course of this season. I mean, players like that, they're always valuable. They're always going to be out there on the market. So that's one thing that's sort of going on. Zach Lowe also dove into on a recent podcast about Jakob and saying that this whole situation with Jakob is kind of confusing him, as Jakob is a guy that we all sort of looked at as almost being a lock coming back to the Toronto Raptors this offseason, given the fact that we traded so much to get him at the trade deadline. The relationship seemed to be strong with the organization, and he's just really surprised from what he's been hearing that's not a sure thing he's going to return. And Zach Lowe does predict that he'll end up returning on roughly $20 million per year contract, but, it's strange, what's going on up there in Toronto. That's a Brian Windhorst reference, not Zach Lowe. Same company, but, with Jakob not being officially being brought back. So, that's one thing to take a look at, and one thing that sort of factors into all this, and this is where he sort of discusses the volatility really coming into play, is regards to Pascal Siakam, especially in the potential supermax contract he could be landing following this upcoming season. And it's been brought up to me a lot because I've been happy that Siakam wanted to stay into Toronto. He's always spoke highly of the city, of the team, of the organization. It's nice to have stars that want to stay in Toronto, but a lot of people have pointed out that the big reason for this is because he wants to be in a, surefire state where he has the most opportunity to cash in on his next contract. And obviously being on the team that drafted him, where he's already the number one option, right, can have that opportunity to land that supermax contract. It makes sense for him to want to stay in Toronto. And basically, Zach Lowe said the Raptors are taking a risk if they see they don't view Siakam as that number one guy, that supermax level of player, by bringing him back and sort of risking that money coming out there. And if the Toronto Raptors don't view him as that type of player, right, things could get messy in terms of, having to deal him away, whether, this summer, the trade deadline, however things are sort of rolling. The Toronto Raptors are in a volatile spot because they have to figure out what they're going to do with Pascal Siakam. If Pascal leaves, Jakob, his relationship there, that could sort of lead to some fraying in our front court, right? You also have OG Anunoby, who's an unrestricted free agent come next season, and Masai Ujiri. He only has so much money to work with, so much money to play around with, and given Siakam a potential supermax deal in the range of $50-60 million per year, at the back end of those deals, right? And then also extending OG Anunoby, giving him a contract extension, right? Those are all things you have to factor into play. And he just signed a new agent. We broke that down in the most recent video. So, lots of decisions and a lot of potential avenues Masai Ujiri could go. And then we also have talks about Fred VanVleet potentially coming back, staying with the Toronto Raptors. Is basically Josh Loomberg came out today and said that he's spoken with a few people around the league who aren't buying the Houston as a Fred VanVleet landing spot, despite reported interest. And he'll say, money talks, Houston has cap space to make serious run at Fred and drive up his price. I'm told that the Raptors remain confident that they'll be able to keep him. And this is fairly interesting as, we basically had a lot of reports, a lot of indications that Fred VanVleet would likely be going to the Houston Rockets, given comments from their coach, right? Reports going on around multiple sources, Mark Stein, Jake Fisher, guys around the league, Bill Simmons. So check out that whole breakdown in the previous video if you want that. But it feels like we're getting different reports, different stuff popping left, right, and center. So we just got to keep covering it all, keep breaking it down. But it's some madness going on with the Toronto Raptors right now. And let me know what you guys think. What you guys think is the most ideal situation, ideal scenario for the Toronto Raptors at this point, given everything that's sort of being broken down. But the next thing we're taking a look at, and we discussed him briefly, is regards to OG Anunoby needing a bigger role going into next season. Now, given he signed a new agent, he's brought in a new guy to sort of negotiate his contracts, a lot of people are predicting he's going to have a contract extension signed with the Toronto Raptors. And the only way for that to happen is if he's getting a bigger role. And this is essentially what Jake Fisher came out and said, that it'd be difficult to see OG Anunoby back in Toronto with a huge smile on his face about being the fifth banana again behind Scotty Barnes, Fred VanVleet, and Pascal Siakam. And this is on OG Anunoby leaving Clutch Sports and what it means for his future. So, given the indications that's likely he might be signing a contract extension, or he could potentially be leaving a free agency. We don't know what it surely indicates, right? If that's the stuff that's getting put out to the media, right? To the reporters, the beat reporters. This could be OG Anunoby. This could be a little indication, meaning that all three of those guys won't be back. And we just talked about Fred VanVleet potentially being a dude that is on the run, is on the market to potentially make a trade or to potentially sign with the Rockets, whatever team, right? I'm pretty sold on the Rockets situation going.
I've been freed, finally released from Goody's basement. Now I just need 50 free Riker comments in this video to get back on the next pod. Thanks.
You let him out? Oh. Sorry about that. We'll see what happens with OG Anunoby. Let me know what you guys think. I'm not sure what that was. A little technical difficulties happening out here on the video. But let's dive into the next topic of discussion. The next thing, big returns happening. Kyle Lowry, potential return to the Toronto Raptors. Income, potentially incoming. Me as a Kyle Lowry stan, a guy that loves this dude, hoping he's coming back after these reports that have come out. Is basically, news has come out that the Miami Heat have considered waiving Kyle Lowry if they are unable to find a trade partner. Now, we discussed, when this sort of signing happened, the Miami Heat, that the second and definitely the third year of Kyle Lowry's 3-year, $90 million contract signing with the Heat. That's a lot of money for the back end of a guy that's dealt with injuries over the course of his career, already showed signs of a decline before he headed to Miami, even though we're seeing what impact he still has on winning and the value he provides to a team. $30 million is a lot of money. But if he's waived, if he is bought out by the Miami Heat, because I don't think the Raptors should end up trading for him, could the Raptors be a potential landing spot? And you look at our current roster, whether or not Fred VanVleet is back or not, we're lacking guard depth. Now, Marquise Noel is a guy that I'd like to see potentially get an opportunity. Jeff Dowtin's a guy that's proven himself as a guard in this league. So, definitely don't want him buried deep into the bench the same way he was last season. And then we still have Malachi Flynn and Delano Banton, who show some promise, for sure. But we don't have any surefire guards, especially if Fred VanVleet leaves. Some people have been pointing to Scotty Barnes being a full-time point guard, going in that direction, going in that route. But Kyle Lowry is more of a safe bet, and the Raptors are looking to more so have a retool than a rebuild, which seems like the case given everything that's being brought up, especially if Jakob is brought back. He doesn't want to be on a rebuilding team. Kyle Lowry could come in, whether he's off the bench, whether he's like a spot starter, Jason Kidd in the later ages of his career, where he started but didn't play most of the game. Kyle Lowry would just make a whole bunch of sense for this team at a small contract, at a small price. So he's the Raptors' growth. Would love to see him back in a Toronto Raptors uniform. We'll see what actually ends up happening regarding his potentially getting bought out by the Miami Heat or anything on that front. But let me know if you guys would like to see Kyle Lowry back on this team. But the final thing we're discussing in this video is Jordi Fernandez is replacing Nick Nurse as head coach of Team Canada. Now, Jordi Fernandez was a finalist in the Toronto Raptors head coaching race. So I guess he built up some of those connections, built up some of those relationships. Canada Basketball, Toronto. Not sure how much of a link there is there, but basically news came out that Sacramento Kings associate head coach Jordi Fernandez has an accepted and added assignment of head coach to the talent-laden Canada national team basketball program. So this is interesting. It's basically when Nick Nurse was fired from the Toronto Raptors, he said he'd live up to his commitment to being the head coach of Team Canada. And news came out that essentially he's not going to end up head coach. And Doug Smith is basically saying that everything I'm hearing is this was the Sixers' call, not Nurse's. I do know Nick was a huge fan, had a huge interest in FIBA basketball, and having been an assistant in the for the 2012 Great Britain team in London, was hoping to head coach in France. So Nurse did want to fulfill his commitment as being the head coach of this Team Canada basketball team, but Sixers basically told him not to do it, I guess. I'm not sure. Maybe that's sort of a way to save face with Nick Nurse being sad about getting fired from Toronto, that whole stuff that's been going on there. Who really knows? But we'll see how this, we'll get a good look at Jordi Fernandez as head coach if things don't work out with Darko. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about all of this Toronto Raptors news. You guys are best to make it this far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.